Alderman Boyd,
Present.
Alderwoman Davis, Alderman Ornowitz, Alderwoman Hubbard, Alderman Coatar,
Here.
Alderwoman Spencer,
Present.
Alderman Oldenburg,
Present.
Alderwoman Boyd, Chairman Rhodey.
Present.
6 present, you have quorum.
Usually at this time, I read my little spiel about what our mission is, but I didn't bring that over today, so I don't have it here in front of me, so I won't do it. Plus, we are kind of in this abbreviated session. We have one board bill before us, so that's it. We're trying to get this, provide this opportunity before the session adjourns for the summer. There has been some discussion kind of behind the scenes about this bill. At one point there was discussion, or about this project, I should say. At one point there was some discussion about this project receiving sales tax rebate, which was contrary to the resolution that that we passed on incentive reform. The developer has graciously agreed, I guess the sponsors have graciously agreed not to proceed with that. They have made some adjustments to their board bill. It is certainly at the limit of what we have kind of been doing lately, but this project is a difficult project, I think, downtown, and while I have some history with the developer, I wanted to make sure that we at least provided the developer the opportunity to come before the committee and present their project, and I wanted to make sure that this is not my committee, it's our committee, so I always try to make sure that anyone with board bills has an opportunity to have them heard. So at this point, we'd like to, Jack, are you going to present, or did you want to have something?
Briefly, if that's all right, Chairman.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you. And that's for members of the committee here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Appreciate you accommodating us for this extra special HUD's committee hearing. Sorry we couldn't get this done last week. We're here today to talk about the chemical building. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this parcel. It's downtown, located on Olive, right next to the existing Hotel St. Louis. The address is, what's the actual address? 721 through 777 Olive. Beautiful old building across the street from the old post office. So those of you that have been down here for a while may remember this. There's been a number of attempts to redevelop this property. In fact, I've got a history sheet here showing one, beginning in 2006, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 failed attempts to get this thing redeveloped. Some developers have gone bankrupt trying. So we're here today. The Gills, Amy and Amrit, who own Restoration St. Louis, redeveloped the building next door. I'm sure many of you have been over there now. It's Hotel St. Louis. It's been a big success. And what they're proposing to do is basically knock out some interior walls. The buildings actually connect underground. So they're proposing to knock out some interior walls, kind of expand their lobby, and do a mixed use of additional hotel rooms for the Hotel St. Louis and some apartments on the top floors. So it breaks down to 84 additional hotel rooms and 72 apartments on floors 9 through 16. Total cost, they're acquiring the building, you've got the sheet in front of you, for $5 million. They're acquiring it from a developer out of New York who does not have the ability to get done the project they had originally intended. It's probably for the best, because I don't know that was a great project for downtown. Construction costs are $42.5 million. They're really utilizing state and historic tax credits. They've already been awarded those credits, which is one of the reasons we're sort of under the crunch, and I know Mr. Richardson will tell you more about that. So what we're asking for today, and I get it's a little unorthodox nowadays, but we're asking for 17 years of property tax abatement, basically to expand the existing redevelopment area authorized for the original Hotel St. Louis at 705 Olive, basically expanded in to take in this parcel and requesting the full 17 years. I know there was some discussion of some other incentives. Those are off the table. I appreciate the chairman and Alderman, the vice chairman working with SLDC and me on some of those requests. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Laura Rebbe from Restoration St. Louis to give a little bit more of an overview, and then I think Mr. Richardson can answer questions, and I know SLDC has done a pretty thorough analysis of this project as well. So thank you all for your time and for being here today. Yes.
Alderman, if I could, on Friday when I had discussed with the Deputy Director of Development for the mayor, she had said that you all were going to come in with 10 years on tax abatement for the personal property tax. Is that?
They're seeking 17 years on the personal property tax, which my understanding goes to the LCRA board. But I was not privy to those discussions, Chairman, so I don't know what the ultimate number that was decided.
Okay.
But I think we certainly can discuss that today. I mean, that's fine. So I'll invite Laura Rebbe up.
Hi, thanks. What we're proposing here, I know you have the rough numbers there, but what we want to do here is take Hotel St. Louis, which is at the corner of 7th and Olive, and expand it into the vacant building to the west, into the chemical building. So we will literally be expanding the lobby across the alley. There's already a tunnel that goes underneath the alley, and having the ground floor be our lobby, and then up 8 floors of hotel rooms, and then the rest apartments, because the numbers don't support a full hotel and they don't support full apartments. The only way we can make the numbers work is with a mixed use, and then a rooftop bar, restaurant, venue of some type, and some retail on the ground floor for street visibility, street activity. We tried to buy this property before we bought 705 because we thought it might work best as before we developed 705, because we thought it might work best to flip them, and we were unable to make the numbers work at the price they were requesting, and we had to let it go. So we have run these numbers 5 different ways. It's a really difficult project to make work, as I think you can see from the 6 prior people who could not make it work. It's expensive property. Parking is a big issue. The downtown market is difficult to figure out how to do apartments, what size on that floor layout of this historic building. Can't quite work as a hotel, can't quite work as apartments. The other thing is that we are, to make this happen, we are extending our existing lenders and federal investors from Hotel St. Louis, same people, and asking them to double down and do twice the investment in downtown St. Louis to also do the chemical building. And I'll be honest, they're a little skittish about that. And we originally sold them saying we were asking the city to just extend our incentive package that we have on 705. We were asking the city, not that the city committed, but we were asking because it's an expansion of Hotel St. Louis. And we had some initial city support saying, yes, we love Hotel St. Louis, we're doing very well, we're selling out. The city reception has been fabulous for Hotel St. Louis. When we got into discussions with the city, there were some concerns, particularly about the sales tax rebate. And we understood that. After discussions, we understood that that was a difficult thing. And so we worked with the city and said, what could we do instead that meets the city's needs to not give a sales tax rebate, but that closes the funding gap for our lenders to be willing to extend this package? And we came up with the personal property exemption. And we went back to the lenders and said, okay, it's not 20 years, it's 17 because it's an extension and already 3 years of run on the district. And it's not sales tax, it's personal property tax, which is less, it's lower, and we'll find a way to kick in the gap. Is this enough? Will this work? And that's what we're requesting. And I'll tell you, I came from a law firm before I worked with the Gills. I officed across the street for 20 years in 705 Olive, used to be office buildings, and I have seen the empty chemical building, for 20 years. And it's a shame. I would love to see it open and vibrant and a better block down there. St. Louis deserves that. And I'm a city resident, and I want the city to use its money well. I'm glad you're asking the questions. They're the right questions to ask. But I really believe this is a good use of the city's money and necessary to restore this building, bring it back into service. I don't know if anybody has questions for me or if you'd like detailed discussion from David Richardson, who has numbers on the incentives.
Well, usually we like to hear from our own person. Who ran, was it Matt or was it you, Jonathan? Matt, do you want to walk us through the numbers?
John, I might need to call on you since you want to walk through this. But like you said, we've run this many different ways to see what would work best for the city and what would work, still work to make the project go. The removal of the hotel property sale, or I'm sorry, the hotel sales tax rebate basically doubled the return to the city. So it brought, when we look at the bottom line, it brought the project rate up from just borderline 3.5 stars to 4.25 stars for return to the city. And the developer return of 8.9 is fairly consistent with what we saw for the hotels last week, the 21C and Moxie, et cetera. So bottom line, I think that's the bottom line of what we've got here. I don't know what other questions you might have.
Matt, what was the incentives that we did for the two hotels a couple weeks ago?
I believe 21C was and you might correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was 85% for 15 years? Or 10? 85% for 15 years for 21C.
Wasn't
Moxie?
I thought it was one of them was like 10 and 5, an extra 5. So it was
85 to 10, just come out. And so that for that particular hotel, it was 85 for 10 years and 5 for 50.
okay. And the other one was
It was less. It was 75 for 10, and this was Moxie. It was a lower price point and a lower cost. So I think it was 75 for 10.
okay. Well, my concern has been that with all the new hotels coming on board, I had been getting calls. Well, I had my own concerns, but also concerns from a number of the members on the board at the time that, we're incentivizing these hotels. Is there demand for the hotels and so forth? And
So, Mr. Chairman, can I add?
sure, you go.
It was worthwhile noting, though, that this is a mixed-use project as opposed to the two that we were just asked about, or just full hotels. And obviously, each of the buildings in each site has a different condition and scenario that we have to, and I would add, while I'm standing here, is that what we always look at is the return on investment to the city. And in this case, the return on investment has increased based on the negotiations that has gone about, but it is also something that puts us in the same situation as the other two hotels that we talked about as far as the return. So a similar report in response to the city's needs.
Okay. Well, we're here because I wanted to make sure that the committee participated in this and asked their questions and shared their concerns. Alderman Boyd, do you have any questions of?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Has the project been awarded the federal and historic tax credits already?
It's been awarded state and federal historics. That was done, so the credits were awarded to the, I guess, the previous developer that the Gills are purchasing the parcel from, Morgan Communities.
Okay. And is this going to have a CID and a TDD?
Yes, it will have, so there's an existing CID and TDD, which are each 1% taxes on the property that exist at 705. Those will be expanded, and there's a bill in Ways and Means today on the SID. The TDD does not actually come to the Board of Aldermen. That's done to the courts.
And out of curiosity, you might have said it, so what kind of retail is going to be inside the hotel?
On the, I will let Laura speak to that. I couldn't tell you what the retail is there. I know there is one, is there still a retail space in that first floor currently open?
There's still
The
a
jewelry
jewelry,
store.
yeah.
Okay. Well, go ahead, Laura.
In the new building, in the current building, there's a ground floor restaurant and a rooftop bar. In the new building, we are negotiating with the current jeweler to put him in a new, cleaner space, but about the same size. We're planning a corner restaurant, hoping to be a deli-type lunch, breakfast-type restaurant. And we will also have a rooftop venue. And then, I don't know if you consider this retail, but we'll have expanded ballroom banquet-type facilities. So that's a retail sales tax as well.
Okay. And the CID, you said not a TDD, you're just going to do a CID, is that correct?
No, both.
You are doing both?
Yes.
And how many years is that going to run?
I'll let David speak to that.
Those will, this is Dave Richardson with Hush Blackwell. So those will also just be an extension of what we did for Hotel St. Louis. So it'll be the remainder of the term of the SID and TID there, so the remainder of the 20 years.
What did it start out as?
Started, by the time this one opens up, there'll be 17 years left.
Okay. Matt, so basically the 17 years of tax abatement is worth 7.2 million, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. You know, I'm very pro-development, but I think about the awarding of the incentives and how much we give away and all the conversations that have taken place over the past several years. Do we really think 17 years of tax abatement is necessary downtown?
Yes, I mean, when we're looking at big projects like this, we're looking at, or the developers and investors in many cases are looking at options, not just within the city of St. Louis, but Nashville, Columbus, Cincinnati, Kansas City. So when we look at the competitive level, you have to look not just within our boundaries, but beyond the boundaries, to where these large investors can place their money. And the returns offered in the city of St. Louis just don't match those of a lot of other peer cities in the Midwest. And I think what we're seeing is in a lot of these, number one, I think when you don't have somebody lined up behind people
Right.
to do these projects. I think that in and of itself, tells us the story on a high level that, I'm not sure when this has been going on for 10, 12 years. And you keep getting interest and you keep getting failure. So I think that proves on a high level that incentive is necessary. And I would reiterate too that, and I didn't go through this number, but just in 10 years, it is a net, it does end up benefiting the city significantly. So net revenue to the city after 10 years is 1.2 million. And if you look long-term, the return to the city is almost 9 million. So, if we go another 10 years, that's kind of where we would see losses from the city's bottom line.
Yeah, I guess I'm always concerned about developer fees. So developer fees are 10% of the project.
Yep.
And then when we look at giving away all these incentives.
I will note,
I've been in development for 20 years, and I'm not a big time, I could never manage this project, probably, but these costs are all based on a percentage cost of. And so $5.5 million in developer fees. And just imagine if it was only $3 million, maybe that $2.5 million could come back to the city a lot faster, or to the school district.
I will note that we do consider the developer fee in part of calculating the investor's return on the project.
That's a lot of money. So how long is the project going to take
I mean,
to develop?
So this relates to the tax credits and where we're at right now. They are going to try to get it done by the end of 2020 so that they can avail themselves of the federal historic tax credit that you take in 1 year as opposed to having to spread it out over 5 years. The rush here is, it's kind of take a go at it or pass on this project. They would close here this summer, here shortly, and then they would start construction immediately on it. And normally it'd be an 18-month project, and they're going to have to move quickly.
The project is almost $53 million. So David, if the project was $60 million, then the developer's fee would be $6 million, right?
So the developer fee, so typically, so you're putting in a developer fee so that you can claim tax credits on it as well. But here for this project, the Gills are both the hotel, they're the owner, they're the owner operator and the developer. So it's either, if there isn't a developer fee, it's and as Matt said, the bank and SLDC just look at it as its cash flow or return to the owner operator of the project. So it's not like a separate pot of money. The reason there's a developer fee is to maximize the availability of historic tax credits.
Okay, so that money, theoretically, the Gills would just take that check and pay the loan off faster.
Correct, right. And this developer fee doesn't get paid until after loan. There's a waterfall, so the last thing to ever get paid is the developer fee.
Yeah, in case the project fails.
Correct.
Although there's some slick contractors, they want to piece off their developer fee as the project progresses. You've probably seen that, haven't you?
So there sometimes are funded developer fees, but in the market today, there isn't much.
Oh, those were the good old days, huh?
Those are the good old days.
Okay.
Those would be the 6 developers that preceded the Gills.
I'm going to support this. I just wanted to just kind of point out, because I think about the high-risk opportunities that exist in North St. Louis and how, they're just seem to be developer financially risk adverse to coming over there to really jumpstart economic development opportunities. And I look at Martin Luther King Boulevard as one from the city limits of Wellston to Union. There's a wealth of opportunities, and I think about how 20 years of tax abatement to build a new building or to rehab some property over there could really go a long way. But what developers tend to do, and I'm not trying to beat up on developers because I love this city, we take downtown, we take Central Corridor, we take, Lafayette Square, we take, areas that there's a lot of good activity going on, and we just keep pouring and pouring. And because it's a tough project, we want to give 17 years tax abatement or 20 years tax abatement or 25 if we can get away with it. And why couldn't we just take some of those opportunities and move them somewhere else in the city of St. Louis? That just bothers me. It just troubles me. It's always this focus on downtown, midtown, Lafayette Square. That just bothers me. So I'm giving commentary. I'm going to vote for this, but it frustrates me. So that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Alderwoman Davis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I like the project because it's smart thinking, to have the opportunity to have the known income with the apartments to support the financing is important to me. We do need the hotel rooms. We asked for more hotel rooms. We have a plan in place with convention and tourism. We know that it's failing because we don't have enough hotel rooms. And so we know all of this. We also know that building's been sitting there empty for I don't know how many years.
2005.
Yeah, and when you have that many failures and you finally got some people who do know how to get it done, I appreciate that. But what I wanted to share with the public is the understanding of the tax abatement and the TIFs that we work on every day. If you have a building that's sitting there or a piece of land that is abandoned and/or has someone who owns it and chooses not to develop it, and many times chooses not to pay the taxes on it either, we have nothing. There is no income to the city. So when you take zero and you go to the project being finished and having this revenue come in, and also sharing the revenue with the person who has chosen to take on the risk of a project like this, it only makes sense. And I don't know how we're going to ever get that understanding out there that when you have zero and now you have the prospect of generating income for the city and on more levels than just paying the taxes. I mean, think about the people who are going to come in these hotel rooms. Think about the people who are going to live in those apartments. And they will be spending money, enjoying this city, using services in this city, all over this city and region, really, not just the city of St. Louis. And so when we have these opportunities, we do need to explore, and that's what I love about the system that was put in place for the financial impact reports, because it tells you, it shows you exactly where we're going. But what I do know is that between, what's that building over there? The Kill, when that project was done, and there's another one, I'm trying to get it in my head. We will never hit that. I think the Kill was, 35 years on incentive? The Opera House, yes, Opera House. The Opera House, Peabody is what it's called. Well, no, it's Stiefel now. It's Stiefel now. But that was one that nobody could really wanted to support, but we knew we needed to. And so I just want to say a couple more things, Mr. Chairman, and then I'm going to be done. There are developers, and then there are explorers. That's what I call them. And David knows me well, because when he first came on board with his law firm and working on TIFs here, I'm a taskmaster, and I don't give my vote easily, but I do want to see people who do good work, and I do want to see people that we can trust to get the job done and maintain it, and who has the ability to sustain a project. And that's what we're talking about with this building. You had 6 people couldn't do it. This is going to be done, and I want to ask the developer to consider that the basement walkway is open so that the public can go back and forth, because that's an exciting thing that happens with the Marriott. We don't have to go outside from the hotel room to go over to the ballroom. So they have that walkway under there. So consider that.
It'll be on the main floor.
Okay.
It'll be open.
So you can connect the main floor.
The basement's already connected. It's going to need to be expanded, but that'll be for services.
Okay.
To pass back and forth. But the main floor will be connected.
Okay.
Between the 2 buildings.
The
Okay.
alley will be vacated and a one-story addition will be put in.
Yeah, and that's why that place books up so fast, because people like that. All right. My technical question to you is, when I was looking here, explain to me So in my soft cost for the development, the 5% is a little bit high, but is that because of the difficulty of the project?
Soft cost.
Because what, I'm sorry?
Your development soft cost is just a little bit high. Is that because of the nuance of the project?
Yeah, it's a historic project that we're trying to connect to another historic project.
Okay.
So we're using, Roseman Architect, and there's some elevator issues, and there's some special structural issues, and so, that's our estimate. Maybe we'll be able to bring it in lower.
Okay.
But that's just
Okay.
where
And
it's coming
I
in.
would also say that, so the SLDC takes our more detailed pro forma and summarizes it into line items, but our soft cost includes like construction period interest, things like that. So it's not just architects and engineers.
Okay. Because that's what I had in my mind. Okay, that makes more sense. So I thank you very much, and I am going to support this project.
Alderman from the 5th?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I just have a few comments. I definitely support this project, but I'll say this too. It makes you caution yourself because within the last couple of years, just in my ward alone and even in your ward too, we've had the last hotel, 21C and Shell Building, those two bills that I just brought forward last week, the Jefferson Arms Project, which is a huge headache of mine right now. And so it makes you wonder, like, does the market call for all these hotel rooms? But it does. And so I
can speak to that a little bit.
go ahead.
So I think one thing, if we look at removals, we look at kind of what's on the market and what's coming to the market, but the Millennium being removed from the market, and I think it was the Radisson that was also on, there's another one downtown, a couple other buildings. If we look market-wide at kind of our trends in hotel rooms over the past 10 years, we're actually pretty flat, and then we're going to be adding a bunch, at the end of 2018 through 2019 and ahead. But if we look at peer cities in the Midwest, they've seen 20% increases in the number of hotel rooms over that period. In Nashville's seen something crazy like 75%.
Really?
So we don't anticipate being Nashville, but when you add these hotel rooms in, kind of looking ahead, it gets us kind of back to where we would expect to be. And you should expect there to be a normal turnover in hotel rooms. We're kind of behind the curve on some of these newer, quote, hip hotels that other markets are seeing that we just don't have. It's kind of like that's the catch-22 that we've seen out so long in downtown with the office market is you can't get new office tenants because you don't have new products, but then you don't have new products because the vacancy is low. So you're kind of the same catch-22. And I think just anecdotally through some discussions, even in the last couple weeks about people talking about potential hotel projects is I think the market is starting to catch up with what's been going on, and that when somebody comes and inquires about, well, what about a hotel, and we start talking to them about what's been going on in the last year, their enthusiasm for that project cools. So I think the market does, all the developers out there about, I'm sorry, I think I said apartments, for hotels, are aware of this pipeline, so I think they know it. So they're taking that into consideration when they're making their decisions, and I think we're starting to see that interest cool.
Okay. And I totally understand that part of it, but it makes you caution yourself, and I just hope that as a city, I know we're going above and beyond to make sure that we have hotel rooms, we want to increase tourism and all of that stuff, but it seems like we just always roll out the red carpet for things downtown, and when it comes to North St. Louis and our community, it's always like a hurdle involved, and I just hope that at some point we can get to the point where we really lay it out for North St. Louis. We go above and beyond on the incentives to make people want to revitalize like Martin Luther King and other areas, because the area is so ripe. And with NGA coming, I hope that we realize that, okay, this is the opportunity. We have all these designations, Promise Zone, the choice neighborhood stuff, all of these designations, which will really like put us in a good space with doing development. So I just hope that we use it, and it makes me feel some type of way sometimes when these things are packaged together, because right now I'm dealing with a project in my ward where when everything was going on, they never mentioned the tax abatement, but because there was a delay in the tax credits and the construction costs went up, it's like, okay, if the city has this opportunity for us to get a tax abatement, let's do it. And we need to get away from stuff like that to just structure something, and because we have it, we use it, because it's not to our benefit, and especially in North St. Louis where there is no development taking place. So I definitely support the project. I think it'll be good for downtown. We're able to revitalize something. I've been to the Hotel St. Louis. They have the closest thing to famous and bars, old French onion soup in the city. So I commend the efforts regarding this project. But as a city, I hope that we can just be more selective in how we place incentives. And so that's all I have.
Alderwoman Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a couple of questions. Earlier it was mentioned that this project would bring in $1.2 million for the city within the first 10 years. Can you point me to that, Matt, on the sheet where you're finding that and what the revenue stream for the $1.2 million is?
10-year revenues to city, net revenue to city.
That's that 1.9?
Yep.
And what does that revenue come from if we've evaded 100% of the real estate tax?
Well, hotel retail sales tax.
And we're estimating that based on occupancy of the hotel, or is there also a sales tax component to that 1.9 million?
There is, yeah, that's the big one, but there's also just retail sales taxes, and then earnings taxes, et cetera.
Earnings tax from the potential tenants?
Tenants and employees.
Got it. Do we have a breakout of the number of rooms, hotel versus apartment?
Yeah, it's in that summary sheet, I think.
Right.
It's on,
84 hotel rooms, 72 apartments.
Yeah.
what are the apartments going to rent for?
I believe $2.10 a square foot.
What does that translate to? What are we looking at? 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom apartments?
It's planned to be all one-bedroom apartments.
1-bedroom apartments, what's the starting rent for these?
Probably about $1,600 bucks.
That's right, yeah.
210 a square foot, about 800 and something square feet.
So if I'm reading this correctly, the total project cost will be about $53 million, total public investment over 50%. Is that correct? I don't know, it says the total project cost is around $53 million. 52.9, am I reading this correctly? I'm just looking. What is the total project cost?
That includes the historic tax credit, so that's
Got
not
it.
the city.
No, but this is the cost of the project?
53 million. You got it
Correct.
right. 52.9.
Yeah.
And it looks like the total public to private investment is 50.4% over,
That includes the state.
correct.
And federal.
Understood, yes, but we're subsidizing the project collectively as taxpayers by 50%. Am I reading this correctly?
Yeah, yeah.
But that includes the value of the tax abatement, so it's not a direct subsidy.
Right, because.
Understood. My concern, and I've shared this with my colleagues down here, is the total number of hotel rooms that we're bringing down here. We've talked about it in this committee before, the need for an overall comprehensive look at hotel rooms, a study to really identify how many hotel rooms the city needs, where they should be located. I represent a very attractive part of the city that doesn't currently have a hotel that could really benefit from having hotels spread throughout our city. I think that we could really benefit from understanding how many hotel rooms we actually need in the city of St. Louis and a comprehensive look at where they should go. I know we don't have that. We've talked about very anecdotally replacing hotel rooms, et cetera. We talk about that every time we provide a massive incentive for a hotel project down here, and it's frustrating that we don't have a comprehensive look at the type of development that we time and time again keep looking at down here. It was mentioned.
Can I address your comment?
Sure.
We have similar concerns, and we have instituted a hotel study. It's being done by Gary Andreas currently as we speak. But we also have done our own, Matt has actually done this, as we've compared ourselves to our peer cities in some aspects. So we know initially some of the points he pointed out early. So we know that we have a lack of the, I call it the mix that is attracting travelers, the younger travelers. But we also are trying to figure out exactly our total need and where we should be. So that hopefully the results of that study will be before you when you all return from your summer break.
I think that's great, and actually points to the fact that we should probably be waiting for that study to take a look at a project as massive as this. I mean, this is a pretty big project.
But I guess what I was saying earlier too is that we already know preliminarily, just looking at the data that we have, comparing ourselves to Nashville, Kansas City, Louisville, and the others, that we are behind. We are not even, we haven't even broken even with the kind of hotel rooms that we need in the preliminary study. So we are anticipating the hotel study to give us more specific and factual information that we can then share with
But
the
the
board.
cities that you just mentioned, all four of them, are cities that have local economies that are growing significantly
But they
by
invested in
St.
those.
Louis.
But they
Agreed.
invested in those economies. and so-
Agreed, but you know, part of the problem I have is it was mentioned earlier by I believe Mr. Richardson or perhaps Laura, that there's a lot of pause in investing in St. Louis, that the banks and the folks involved were really hesitant to put money in St. Louis. And I ask the question, why is that? Is it because we lack an investment in public safety? Is it because we lack an investment in our streets and other infrastructure and the crumbling infrastructure that we have? And when we provide massive incentives without, on the back end, providing for the city underneath that is, the backbone of, development, that's where we really run into problems. We have a lack of infrastructure. We need a lot of upgrades to our basic general functioning in our neighborhoods. So I get worried when we're providing such a high level of incentive without first taking care of our own projects.
So I guess my response to that, Alderwoman, would just be, okay, so right now we have a building that's languishing, it's been sitting empty, 6 developers have tried and failed. Obviously, I recognize, and much like you deal with our infrastructure challenges every day, of which downtown are extremely significant, having vacant buildings doesn't help with that process. So will this building eventually go back on the tax rolls? Yes. Will the schools benefit more from it in the future? Yes. In the short term, at least we'll be generating some sales tax revenue. We'll have more people downtown. We'll have more people spending money, which actually has the ability to potentially help with some of our infrastructure problems versus letting the building languish longer.
I understand that, but 17 years, 100%. I represent an area that's also challenged. I recognize that our downtown is challenged, and we're not offering this type of incentives for the vacant buildings down there. We have far more vacancy. I just get worried with such a large amount.
I think you would be offering those types of incentives. If there's developers that are interested in investing capital in the 20th Ward, for small projects, I know we've approved up to, 20 or 25 years in most north and some south wards. And these, obviously, for projects over $1 million, there would be any number of incentives on the table.
Again, it concerns me that we're providing collectively over 50% of tax abatement for what would be considered luxury apartments. And, without having that hotel study done, I'm concerned that we're outside of our bounds here. I appreciate that the developer is going to be investing in a project, a building that's been vacant for, since 2005, but I am hesitant on the project itself. I have no further questions at this time, I maintain my concerns.
Alderman Oldenburg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What was the total development cost of the first project, the Hotel St. Louis?
So when we started that process, which was back in 2015, and we didn't get started on it because of a variety of delays in 2016. When we first started, it was estimated at 55, and the final cost of it was 73.
73?
Yeah.
Well, so I can certainly appreciate the, the over $120 million capital investment that the sponsor and their finance partners are making in downtown St. Louis, and how, a bit of an anomaly that is, for sure, in terms of the investment dollars we need downtown. What was the first incentive? I'm a little unclear, because it sounded like we're really just extending what was the incentive package on the first deal to this. So what did that fully contain?
So the
first
for
incentive.
Hotel St. Louis,
Correct.
it was 20 years of full tax abatement, which that started running in 2018. And then it was a 20-year sales tax rebate, so that 50% of the city's 3% sales tax was will be rebated back to the developer to assist with project costs, and then a SID and a TID.
Okay. Maybe a quick question for SLDC. It was mentioned that, the need for the incentives here, is largely due to the market and the response to this building being challenged and has not come back online. What would you all, SLDC, consider the best comp, for this building, in terms of something that is, sustained or redeveloped? What's the best comp for this
Well,
downtown?
the Hotel St. Louis right next door would be your perfect comp.
Okay.
But, that would be a perfect comp. I think looking at what was done previously and what's proposed here, that does show some advancement in both our kind of scrutiny of projects and ours also, the city's need to provide that incentive, that level.
That's
of
just a
incentive.
hotel, though, but a mix of hotel and
Well, there's
residential
there's
units.
apartments.
There are apartments in
yeah.
Hotel St. Louis, too?
Not
There's 17 or 18 apartments.
Oh, really?
The rest is hotels, yes.
Okay. Didn't know that.
and then if you're looking at that, another comp, I guess, if you're looking to the mixed use,
Right.
would probably be the Laurel. But, the hotel, I don't think is quite the same. But as far as a mix of, almost a 50-50 mix of apartments and hotel, the Laurel is, Embassy Suites would be
Yep.
a good comp.
What's the flag? Is it on Hotel St. Louis?
It's a Marriott autograph collection.
Great.
That's the only one in St. Louis.
Yeah. So I had a couple of questions about maybe the capital stack. I just think it's important to unearth who our finance partners are, who's taking risk in the city of St. Louis. What's the assumed tax credit pricing that you've used in the model here, Matt?
91 for the federal.
Okay. And the states were?
After the lost partner, did you do it? So it's Pete Newton, so it's probably 92 less a lost partner.
Got it. And that's baked into, you got that from their pro forma here? Okay.
We don't look like, we look at the tax credits from the equity to the project, but we don't. We look at the pricing and stuff, but that's not in the model. Like, the pricing is not in the model. It's reflective in the amount of equity that it brings to the project, but we don't do a tax credit analysis.
Right, in terms of whether that's market or not.
Yeah.
You're solely relying on the developer's pro forma.
That's not baked into the model, but we we make
Yeah.
sure that.
You
that-
derived these equity numbers from that pricing, though, that was just.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I apologize, it was 91 and a half on the federal.
Okay. And I think the representative for the developer mentioned that the same lender and tax credit investors are looking at this opportunity as well? And you have LOIs or commitment letters from those folks, and who are they?
Yeah, the federal investor is Stearns Bank.
Okay.
We have a informal commitment from them. The construction lender is Simmons Bank. Simmons,
Sure.
also an informal commitment. They are not willing to commit until they see the incentive package.
Sure.
They are also, for this piece, looking to participate out some, and so their commitment will be subject to participation, at least in part. They've got participants lined up, we've been told, but I don't know the names.
Okay. Got it. So that leads me to my next question. And so I have really two chief concerns I just think I want to get addressed here. One is, I think 100% abatement. I think we've tried really hard at this committee and other members of the board to really scrutinize projects and to shy away from a full 100% abatement, because I think the argument can be made that there was a good negotiation and that we're taking the resolutions that we passed down here along our incentive reform that the chairman and this committee have worked very hard on over the last few years, that we're taking that feedback around very scrutinizing, making sure we give the exact amount of incentive to a project. So the 100%, I think is, I think it's more than just optics. I think it's one concern that I have if we give a full 100% abatement to someone. The second concern I have is I feel like there's a timing crunch here, Mr. Chairman, particularly with what's been represented, that the tax credits are a good portion of the incentives will go away if we don't hurry up and give the incentive package that's needed. So I do want to unpack that a little bit, because I want to make sure that we know that, I often take issue if the city negotiating with a gun to their head to say, look, we're going to lose a major chunk of our federal or state incentives if we don't get this particular incentive package locally. So I do want to maybe unpack the timing of things. It was represented that you need to finish by 2020? Okay. Okay.
December,
And that's largely driven by
federal.
the federal tax credit and the tax reform change in law, whether it's a 1-year credit or a 5-year credit?
Correct.
Okay. So there is a potential that you can still seek the 1-year credit till the end of 2023.
We've looked at that with our tax credit investor, about trying to do it, arguing that portions of the building have been placed in service. But to do that, as you know, to get the best indicia of place in service would be a TCO. And to get a TCO, I'd have to have my elevator and things like that done, so it's either going to be we're going to get a 1 year and be done by 2020, or we're not going to have identifiable parts that truly are placed in service in 2020, if that makes sense.
Well, did the developer select a phased project, a 60-month phased project, or a 24-month?
So this one, we're stepping into the shoes of
Right.
failed developer number 6.
Yep.
And if we try to phase it now, the state will treat that as a new application, and then we have to go back into the queue of the new rules, new discretionary process of the state. So, because the state says if you have a phased project, you need to match, the state needs to have similar construction periods.
Yep.
And so they treat that as a new application.
Really?
Yes, going through that on another project right now.
Been there, done that.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. Has the state ever, and I've never come across this actually, but I don't know if the state is open to the extent that there have been so many change of ownerships here, and particularly when creates a timing along a construction schedule. I mean, that would feel like a back to a landscape where they might extend the construction period as a result of, we stepped into a historic application here, and it's an 18-month project, and we only have a year to complete it. I mean.
So, we are stepping into the shoes, and we're
Right.
doing, just to be able to get their applications, we are basically stepping into their LLC, so that's a little novel as well, so that we don't have to start over. And the state is holding fast to the requirements because they are statutory that you have to start and incur the cost. But we don't think that will necessarily be the
Right.
problem. It's more
the federal credit.
And then
Okay.
just making sure we don't rock the boat with the state, because you can't change applicants, as you know, under the statute. So that's why we're trying to, you can't change control
Yep.
and things like that.
Yep. Okay. I mean, is there an ability to buy more time by, I mean, often projects, you can see the developer, the sponsors just get started with equity, and release a little bit of the pressure here in terms of timing, so that we have what we feel is a fair incentive package locally. I don't know if that's an option here.
Well, there will be substantial, I mean, there's $5.5 million of equity, and as you know, it's all recourse debt, and there is, you know, the federal investor's not putting in all its money up front. The state is a bridge loan. So,
Right.
I mean, the goal here is to get going so that we can get, you know, we don't lose $1 million to $1.3 million of federal equity with the transition rule.
Right.
And then we can step into the shoes and do the state historic tax credit applications that are approved, because if we do have to reapply, nothing's for certain. So, I mean, it's kind of, the Gills, you know, they took, as Laura said, they took a run at this in 2016. It didn't make sense. You had a developer after that who now has lost it. And so it's kind of a now or nothing to expand the hotel. And if it's not the right time, then, you know,
Right.
do another project.
The sponsor could still get started, though, without, you know, it could still take down the building and get started with equity in order, you know, to relieve any kind of time pressure there, right? Because if you have to finish by a certain date, getting started now would allow you to do so.
Right, and I guess as their counsel, I'd recommend not doing that, considering the past 6 developers who have done that and have all failed and filed for bankruptcy and foreclosed. And I mean, I can go through those because I represented several of those. We've had developers from LA who started in 2006 who did 2 bites at the apple on this. Just a little bit of history. So in 2006, Civitas Development, who did the 80 Brown building successfully on Washington and Tucker, then took this building down and planned to do it as condominiums, a couple floors of office and retail, and the Board of Aldermen approved 15 years of tax abatement for that. Then 2 years, they couldn't get that going. 2 years later, they switched to doing all apartments, and they got a TIF for that of $4.4 million and a SID, and then they lost it, and Century Bank foreclosed on it.
Yep.
And then fast forward 2 years later, Land White, which is out of New Jersey and Indianapolis, came forward, stepped into the shoes. We amended the TIF to do a different apartment regime, smaller apartments. They lost the building to their bank. And then you have failed number 4 was TWG Development. That was going to do market rate apartments. And then our last developer was going to do micro apartments and has lost it as well. So, I mean, taking down a building, you sometimes get stuck with, you know, a white elephant, or as Alderman Hubbard said, you know, the guys with the Jefferson Arms, they took down that building and now they can't get it closed. So they're difficult projects, and once you have it, you can't unload it.
Sure. Okay. I have no further questions.
I want to announce that there's actually a Ways and Means Committee that's scheduled to start at 10 o'clock. They've been very gracious in waiting for us to complete. I apologize for us running over. I didn't realize that when we scheduled this, we were potentially infringing upon your time. We have one last question, one last member of the committee, and then have a couple. Alderman, what?
I'm trying to catch up.
Okay. I am really torn because I have some real reservations about us not taking our resolution seriously, and you know, I know I've spoken with the mayor before. She had said that she wanted to get at least some income from tax abatement right away. When I brought that up to Deputy Director of Development, Ms. Martinez, last Friday, she said that they had run that notion by the banker, that, if they did 90% and 75, for 10 years or something like that. And evidently the banker did not understand that, or supposedly the banker sent the message back and they wanted 100%. At which I suggested perhaps they cut the personal property tax from 17 years down to 10 years as a compromise. And it was under that agreement that I agreed to have the hearing today. So I was trying to get this at least in line with what I thought the mayor's intentions were and what I thought the spirit of our resolution was. So it was under that agreement that I went ahead and had the hearing today. I certainly have had some buildings in my ward. I have been, probably not at the largest. I would think that would be downtown or perhaps the 6th ward. But certainly my ward has been a beneficiary of a tremendous amount of support from throughout the city. We have tried to take our job here the last couple of years very seriously and do this. This project is, beautiful building. I am, I'd love to see it saved. The alderman from the 7th has been always great to work with down here, but we've had 6 runs at this thing. And then we show up today and there's 17 years. I mean,
Mr. Chairman, maybe I can address that if you give me a moment. So, as you've indicated and others have said, we've had several runs at this project, and obviously if you look at it, if you go down Olive and look at it with the graffiti and the windows and everything on it, it has been a very difficult building to get done. And to address some of the other comments that have been said, the difference obviously between the 10-year personal property and the 17-year was about a little less than $100,000 over the life of this project. And so if the bank and the developer had asked for the 17, our interest was to eliminate the blight and get this building done. It's one more that we will have on the tax rolls, but also we're providing, if you will, a return to the city, as it's not doing that at this point. We are missing a great opportunity on this project, given the historic taxes that are available. I know the concern here is that we are looking at 100%, but previous boards obviously provided the incentive that we are just trying to extend to this particular project, given the proximity to it. So I think the board in 2015, this is prior to our incentive reform efforts, provided 20 years of tax abatement at 100%, as we would on all of the tax abatements prior to 2015 was primarily 100%. And then we moved to reduce that amount all over. And so I think our effort, and I guess I'm asking the board to, an effort to try and get this project done, to look at this as an extension of what we had previously done to try and get this project redeveloped. So I understand that there's many of you have concerns or have issues either with the project or the tax abatement or with the developer. But if we could, for the sake of, I call it, getting this project done, if we could have support for it, I would certainly appreciate it. Somebody said something about why is it so difficult to do projects in the city of St. Louis. People come and they all expect to have a return, but they are concerned about risk. And so risk in the city of St. Louis is different than it is in a lot of other places, primarily because of the condition of our infrastructure. But it's also, the city of St. Louis, choose not to invest in our city because we are reluctant. I guess it's the show me attitude. So we always, and I know I do, I travel to all these other cities and I marvel at the progress that they're making. But and the other thing that I do that many people won't do is I watch their legislative channels. and I see what they're doing as compared to what we're doing. And I'm just asking for us to put the good of the city in place for this particular project.
One of the reasons when I became chairman of HUD's I was interested in this incentive reform is I want to tell a little story because I think it's kind of appropriate. Shortly after I was down here, what used to be the Statler Hilton Hotel, which is the two round buildings down on the riverfront, came before us for tax abatement. That project was about 25 years old at the time. It had completed, burned off the tax abatement. They asked for another 25 years of tax abatement, which we granted at the time. As a new alderman, I agreed to do it. And now it's 25 years later. The hotel is closed down, and I suspect they'll be back over here asking for something like what we're doing today, which is, a very generous incentive package. This incentive stuff gets to be like a dog chasing its tail. If you limit the supply of hotel rooms, the price typically would go up based on supply and demand, but your price can't go up if there's an ugly building next door to you. So you have to fix the ugly building, and then all of a sudden you start getting back into this circular logic. So then you justify fixing up the vacant building, which then creates more supply, which undermines the price. We wouldn't have to go ahead and provide all these incentives if actually the nightly rate for the hotel rooms were higher. So every time we supply these things, then we create an environment where the next developer wants even more, because this just gets, I am really frustrated that I'm seeing it 17 years on personal property after I had the agreement last week. I'm really torn about even offering a chance for somebody. I mean, would you all consider just right now telling us that you're going to go ahead and knock that to 10 years?
Oh, that would kill the project, wouldn't it?
As a matter of clarification, the 10 years was never discussed, or we would never agree to that, just.
Okay, well then maybe I wouldn't agree to have the meeting here today, just so we understand that. So maybe we need to go ahead and just wait and see if you want to go back and consider that or not. Here's the deal. We're showing up. We should have never gotten this far. And we're showing up here today. Everybody's running around the closing table, and you're asking us to double our incentive. Maybe the guy selling the building needs to go ahead and step up with, cut his price. We're talking about a few $100,000, or else, you can go ahead and make it 90% for 10 years and 50% for the last 7 years or something. But these are different things that I had talked to Linda about. She said that she had conversations with the developer. The developer did not want to go ahead and do anything less than 100%. And then I said, Linda, what about cutting the number of years on the personal property tax? And she said we would do that, have it prepared, and that we would have today's meeting based on 10 years of personal property tax. That was the understanding that I had with her Friday before I scheduled the meeting, and that was Friday afternoon.
So sorry if there's a confusion, but the developer never agreed to that, nor was aware that was a condition of holding a hearing.
Okay, well.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to just say just a little bit here. We know that we are sincere about the identification of incentives, but we also know that this is a fluid process, and on occasions we will have projects that will need something different in order to survive. I do know that when you get commitments, you would like to see those adhered to. But I think there might be a better way for us to handle this today, if you don't mind me saying a little bit more.
Alderwoman, your opinion is always welcome in front of any committee that I chair.
All right, thank you, sir. It obviously has been a lot of conversation that's taken place in different silos. And everyone should know that the most important person in this is the chairman of the committee, and should be communicated with on all levels. So no matter if you're talking to room 200 or you're talking to SLDC, at the end of that conversation, the results should come back to the chairperson. That's just how it should be done. And you can't rely on somebody else to do it for you. But where we are today is we need to find a way to get this project out of this committee today. Because here's the other part of this. The developer is willing to take all risks to get this done by 2020, which allows all those incentives to be in place. If we start over again, we don't know what we may or may not get. And the opportunity for the current building to be successful with that eyesore sitting next door is another problem. And I also wanted to ask Otis if he would make sure that we get the study that has already been done by Convention and Tourism on hotel rooms, all those things, how much loss we've had, because there was a study done by Convention Tourism. So Kitty can send that over.
I don't know that there's been a specific study done, but I will certainly inquire.
I was sitting there, I know it was done.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I mean, I'll inquire.
Yeah, I know
They
it's done.
provided me,
Yeah.
they did provide me information from their typical reports, but.
No.
Okay.
This was a very extensive process.
Okay.
Because we know we've been losing tourism dollars, the reasons why, how many hotel rooms would be more likely. During the same period of time, we were talking about refurbishing the convention center itself. That was a project.
And also, just to inform this discussion, I estimated the value of that extra 7 years because the bulk of the personal property depreciates over 5 years. I mean, they're going to continue to buy, replace a portion of that. But my estimate of that extra 7 years is about $100,000.
Now, that was important.
In tax.
Yeah,
in
because
tax
that helps
revenue.
us in our
Right.
thinking
Yeah, it's
to
not-
know
yeah,
that.
It's about
Thank you.
$100,000 is my estimate.
Okay. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to be quiet because I saw that the deputy mayor came in, and you probably need to get some more clarity. So I'm going to be quiet.
I don't know if there's anything.
I thought I saw Linda come in.
She did come in.
I do want her in here. Yeah.
Does SLDC get paid for this project? Mr. Chairman,
Alderman from the 20th.
I have a question of SLDC. The developer fee that goes to SLDC for this project, what is that? What is the amount
I
paid?
don't believe any of the developer fee goes to
Or,
SLDC.
I mean, not the developer fee, but there is a fee to SLDC for the work conducted on this project, am I right?
They just pay an application fee.
The application fee?
Just an application fee, and I can't recall, Dale, what? I think it's $5,000.
$5,000?
Yeah, it's just,
No, the application fee, this is just $1,000.
Just $1,000.
And then at the conclusion of the project, 0.15% of whatever the project cost is would be the fee back to LCRA.
So LCRA gets an additional, what would that total be?
Well, in this case, maybe we're talking about, what, $70,000 or something?
$70,000 would go to LCRA if the project is completed.
Correct.
But not if the project is not completed.
That's correct.
So there is somewhat of an incentive, am I correct, for SLDC, LCRA
way,
to...
Alderwoman, I reject that, and this body does not fund SLDC, and for us to do work, we have to be funded somehow, okay? And so for you to be quibbling over $70,000, I take offense to that. We have to, you have put commitment after commitment on us to do inclusion review, we do incentive review, and we get not a single penny from the city of St. Louis.
Well, Mr. Director, this project would cost the city of St. Louis, the school district, and other entities here several $1 million.
You want to just
SLDC,
It's
shut it
nothing
down?
now.
No, my point is just that we are trying to do our due diligence here as a committee, and it is our job and our charge to do so. Nobody made an allegation, Mr. Director. I was simply asking a question.
Chairman, if I could make a proposition maybe, and understanding that obviously the personal property tax exemption is something that flows through LCRA, would the chairman be amenable, and you'd have to take me on my word, which I think is good, I hope it is, to, instead of the 17-year full personal property tax, I mean, we've done some back of the napkin, we think we could probably, if, you know, a 90-year at 10%, 90% for 10 years, 50% for the next 7. Would you be amenable to that?
Much better.
And I would just have to commit to personally showing up. I mean, if that agreement somehow fell apart, I would just have to personally show up and speak against the personal property tax abatement and write a letter opposing it to the LCRA.
That's pretty good.
What was it, 90% for 10?
90 at 10 and 50 at 7.
Now we get back to,
And I apologize I apologize we're having this in an open hearing because I was not privy to the conversation.
I guess we get back to the whole issue of the veracity of the developer, because it was my understanding that when the developer rejected any reduction, anything like 90% before, because the bankers didn't understand that, and that was what was communicated to me previously, that they were dealing with out-of-town bankers.
Take the additional risk with their own money.
Is that, I mean, is that not what you had relayed to me? So that if we went ahead and had 90% or anything like that on the real estate taxes, that was, you know, we're sitting here and it is now half an hour into Ways and Means hearing. I am, all right, Linda, I don't know where we go here. You want to step up? And I thought we kind of had an understanding on Friday that we weren't even going to get, you know, that we were going to present something that was 10 years for the personal property tax.
That's what you had communicated, that was what you wanted to support. I communicated that to the developer and their team. They came back and said that wouldn't work, and I said, that's what you said.
Okay, well, then I didn't want to have the hearing today, and that's why I emailed you Friday afternoon, and you said, you asked me to schedule the meeting, so that's why I did.
What I heard you say was you didn't want anybody to talk to you about changes to the 10 years, and so that's what I communicated.
Okay, well then why don't we just go ahead and adjourn.
Chairman, then my request would be this. I prefer to, if we could pass, I'll commit to you that I'll only support 10 years of personal property tax exemption at LCRA, and if they can't make that work, the project will die, but at least we'll get it out of committee and give it a chance. I'll commit that to you. And if they can't figure out how to make the numbers work, there won't really even be a need to perfect the bill.
Okay, when's your hearing?
I don't actually know if there's one even scheduled. Is there even a hearing?
It would be the next LCRA meeting, so 3 weeks to that.
Tuesday the last full week. Tuesday the last full week of the month is normally scheduled.
Okay, so there's one coming up. There's one coming up.
And so your intent is to then second read on tomorrow and then?
So, given some of the changes in our rules regarding engrossment, I truthfully don't know if I'm going to ask to suspend the rules and perfect tomorrow or next week. I need clarity on that process. I think we probably all do.
Let's assume that, yes, you will do that.
Okay. Now, if Otis is saying they're willing to have a special LCRA meeting, could that be next week? Could be next week before we final pass a bill.
If we can do that, then with the understanding that I will be on the floor arguing.
Understood, and I will be
against suspension. So.
And I will be at a hearing testifying against the personal property tax of greater than 10 years.
Alderman, I think this is a reasonable compromise. Thank you very much for your efforts on this front. With that understanding, the chair will entertain a motion on Board Bill number 71.
I move that we adopt Board Bill 71 with a due pass recommendation.
Second.
Seconded. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderwoman Davis.
Aye.
Alderman Ornowitz. Alderwoman Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderman Coatar,
Aye.
Alderwoman Spencer,
No.
Alderman Oldenburg,
Present.
Alderwoman Boyd, Chairman Rhodey,
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd.
She's abstaining.
I need to hear it. That's 5 aye votes, 1 no vote, and 2 present.
By our vote, we passed this out of committee with a due pass recommendation. Want to thank everybody for their patience. I completely ignored our agenda again today by approving the meeting, but given our late time and the great patience that the members of the Ways and Means Committee have shown, I would waive that for today and ask that we be adjourned. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you.